Right. And so do we know, Jessica, who the Russians were specifically talking about in terms of this derogatory information?
Well, you know, none of the specific details, none of the sources would actually say which specific Trump aides were discussed. But one of the officials said that the intelligence report actually masked the American names. And despite that, though, it was clear that conversations did revolve around the Trump campaign team in general. And another source, they wouldn't give specifics, citing the classified nature of the information.
If I listen long enough to you,
into possible coordination between the Trump campaign and Moscow has identified a current official in the White House as a, quote, significant person of interest. That paper sources people familiar with the matter, but the reporting does not identify who that person might be, saying that it is someone close to the president. The paper also collusion, obstruction of justice, cover-up, money laundering, just some of the phrases being used with increasing regularity.
Up front tonight, breaking news. Kushner's Russia connection. The Washington Post and NBC News reporting moments ago that FBI investigators are now focusing on President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and meetings he had with the Russian ambassador and the head of a Russian bank that is the subject of American sanctions. The Post report says Kushner is being investigated because of, quote, the extent and nature of his interactions with the Russians.
It was another weekend of damage control for the Trump White House. This following allegations against President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. On Friday, the Washington Post reported that in December, Kushner discussed with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak the possibility of opening a secret and secure communications channel between the Trump team and Moscow. It adds they considered using Russian diplomatic sites in the U.S. in order to shield their pre-inauguration discussions from monitoring. Several top administration officials, while not confirming the allegations, have come out defending Kushner.
Any way that you can communicate with people, particularly organizations that are maybe not particularly friendly to us, is a good thing.
Now, to punctuate that point, multiple U.S. officials tell NBC News tonight that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, one of his closest advisors, has come under FBI scrutiny in the Russia investigation. The officials tell us federal investigators believe that Kushner has significant information related to their inquiry, but it does not mean that they suspect him of a crime or intend to charge him.
Having a back channel is something that governments have done in the past, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my question would be, why the secrecy? The president-elect had been talking about changing the relationship with Russia for quite a long time. There would be no need to go to this effort to try to hide from your own government what you're doing.
Yet DHS is withholding the very documents that would help us on both sides of the aisle, help our committee understand exactly how our state election systems were attacked by the Russians. So I look forward to your cooperation.
As to the rest of the documents, if you'll permit me to go back, and I commit to you that we will have a more fulsome answer for you. But as to the specifics of each document, I would have to go back and check on that.
Okay, I'm counting on you
to
deliver. Because the telephone script is literally only 13 sentences long. It does not refer to any specific state or any specific attack. It's just a generic script that provides no additional information at all. And, you know, just curious about where are all the supporting documents that we requested that set forth the details of the attack. And with all due respect, the telephone script does not help us do our job, which will help you in turn. You have not provided us with any information about the tools the attackers use or their tactics that they utilize, or any information on the results of your conversations with these states or the steps you took to follow up. So it's been more than a month since we asked for those documents.
When you characterize these things as attacks, I think that is perhaps overstating what may have happened in the 21 states, as was mentioned over the course of the summer. The majority of the activity was simple scanning. Scanning happens all the time. It's happening right now to a number of probably your websites. Scanning is a regular activity across the web. I would not characterize that as an attack. Scanning, it was not also necessarily an election system that was scanned. That's additional context that we provided to our partners in the state. What we saw in a lot of those cases was frankly drive-bys. It was doing a drive-by, seeing what was there, seeing if the door was locked. In a lot of the cases, as Secretary Shedler pointed out, there was adequate protections involved.
We're not going to wait for the Senate investigation, but there is an investigation underway in the intel community. Typically, you wait until those things are complete before you take action. In this case, we're probably going to go ahead just because of the clamoring for this to occur, rightly so. We're going to take up sanctions this next work period.
You've said on more than one occasion that you've seen ample evidence of the Trump campaign's Russia collusion. Last March, you said you had more than circumstantial evidence of treasonous collusion with Russia. What specifically were you referring to? And please be specific, because if it's true, I do believe Americans have the right to know a year later what that is.
If you look at the facts that are already in the public domain, they're pretty damning. Starting with what we know about George Papadopoulos, one of the few foreign policy advisors to the campaign. We now know that Papadopoulos was approached by the Russians and told...
Do you have any reason, other than your affinity for Assange, to doubt this material?
I believe that stuff was released. Where it came from, I have no idea. I certainly know he did not get it from the Russians. And prove me wrong. Can you prove me wrong?
Well, I'm showing you the evidence.
Right. Well, that's not the evidence. That's something that Mueller put out there and his investigators. We don't know for sure where it really came from. You can say 17, there's not 17 intelligence community organizations that have signed off on this. So there's reasons to doubt the intelligence community.
Look, obviously it's possible, entirely possible, maybe likely that the Russian government broke into the DNC servers before the last election. It certainly sounds like something they might do. But before we act like we know for a fact that that's what happened and go to war with Russia over that, shouldn't we see some actual evidence that it happened? Why not? Like maybe a server, or at least a clear explanation of what happened. We haven't seen that. And that's what Trump asked for. How dare he? That's a treasonous thought, we were told. He's a quisling, a traitor to his country. That's what they're saying. And not just a few of them, all of them are saying that in unison. Think for a second about what they are demanding. If you don't automatically accept the imprecise, non-specific, never fully explained findings of shadowy intelligence agencies with long, documented track records of making serious mistakes, you've somehow betrayed your country. The very people who assured you that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, the ones who said the Shah would never fall in Iran, etc., those people must be believed without question or else.
So we know Trump is in Putin's pocket. The reason remains why. There's only two possible answers. Either Putin has something on him or he's an idiot. Whether he knows it or not, what's clear is that Trump cannot stop cozying up to Putin.
You have always been skeptical that there was such a plan, that it was some kind of great crime and it needed to be investigated. Are you now convinced?
Absolutely not. Let me issue the obligatory disclaimer. I am not, nor have I ever been, a supporter of Donald Trump. Let's remember what this story is, because it's the overarching narrative in which Mueller and this investigation operate. According to the story, Russian leader Putin directed a kind of attack, they say, on American democracy in 2016. What is being said is that President Trump was put in the office or abetted by the Russians, and people go on to say that he is therefore in some way under the control of the Kremlin and therefore treasonous, because it was such a clumsy, essentially commercial operation. Now, are we really going to endanger the American presidency and our relations with Russia with what is not truly, so far as we can see, hard intelligence, factual, but scuttlebutt?
The next indictments may well look at the, we don't know this for a fact, but we believe that one of the things he's looking at are these intelligence agency connections that went into the DNC and into John Podesta's emails. And then would come the question, were they getting any guidance, any coordination from anyone in the campaign? There's been no evidence of that, hard evidence out there yet.
And we're not going to accept the false equivalency
between a genuine indictment that Mr. Mueller released with lots of evidence that these 11 intelligence officers, 12 intelligence officers, military intelligence officers, violated our sovereignty, with this cockamamie crazy story that Vladimir Putin spun in that one-on-one meeting.
And likely involvement and possibly secret financial participation. Vladimir Putin is widely rumored to seek a personal piece of the action in deals like a giant office tower being built by Americans in Moscow.
And I think the lay of the land is the following. Donald Trump has always been trying to do business in Russia since the days when he had the beauty pageant there. He has tried and failed at various times.
As you alluded to, he probably would have a piece of it. It could be financed, for example, through Russian state-owned bank, say, and there's some weird connections there. This whole story has a cast of characters around it with shady pasts and Byzantine connections that seem to lead into the Kremlin.
And Jennifer, so you believe we are there. Your column today is the declaration. We are there. We have the evidence that you need.
Well, I think we have the connection at any rate.
It might just be because he really doesn't feel the need, in order to complete his investigation, to get direct answers from the president. He just has so much evidence, especially with Paul Manafort cooperating, enough evidence to kind of build his case.
Is there any way to tell what quarter we're in?
No, I think the responsible thing to do right now as a journalist is to tell the story with the facts that we have so far. And that doesn't mean being a stenographer and saying that we have no idea if the president's aides had any involvement in this. That means being true to the facts, putting them into a narrative and making that narrative clear, telling that story to the American people as we know it so far. And that's really all we can do. And quite frankly, there's a lot we can say so far. The evidence is out in plain sight.
Time to change my mind.